let's talk about Dune. So this is a 1965 sci-fi novel. This is the trilogy edition I've got. Dune is the first book in the original trilogy. Frank Herbert wrote 6 books. His son has co-written many more books. This is, and the summary is, this is an all-time great. It's undeniably an all-time great. There's not really a need at that level for discussion. Not all people are going to jam with it as much as I did, or other people will, of course. But there's not really, I think, much need to dispute that this is a great book. Let me explain, I guess, what it's about, why it's great, and touch on some of the themes and discussions. The basic plot is this, that in the future, in the far future, House Atreides, one of the great imperial houses of the Empire, it's a noble house, a good house. It's led by a good man, Leto Atreides. They get given the desert planet Arrakis. They're told to move from their home planet to the desert planet Arrakis, which is also known as Dune, as a promotion, really. And Dune is an insanely valuable place because it's the only place where a particular mineral develops, spice, melange, which is able to fuel super fast light speed travel. And so it's incredibly valuable because, of course, if you want to get from A to B at any speed at least, you need spice for the way that the navigators get from A to B. This is clear from the beginning that's the kind of the prize, but it's also clear from the beginning that this is a trap, or it's intended as a trap by the former governors of Arrakis and the rivals of the Atreides, House Harkonnen, who are bad. They're the bad guys. At one level, there's a fairly easy good-evil setup. It's very well realised, but it is like there's the good guys, there's the bad guys. It goes more than that. There's a lot more going on, but that's the setup. And the big variable in all this is not Dune per se, though Dune is itself a planet of mysteries and promise. But the big variable is the Duke's son, who's son of the Duke and his warrior nun-like concubine Jessica. Paul is this son, and he has, I guess, special abilities. He's a teenager with special abilities and maybe a special destiny. Again, that's set up very early on. You don't know all the details, you don't understand all the details, but that's set up very early on. So this is a plot full of constant weird new things, mysteries being unveiled, surprises. I can't say much more about that because I don't want to spoiler it. Though there's a weird thing, we'll get to this, but where spoilers are sometimes misleading in this book. What Herbert wants you to be surprised by is not what you think is normal for a book. The writing. Let's talk about the writing then. The writing is very strong. It's third person omniscient. It switches between characters within chapters, revealing a lot of their interior life. It tells you, look, it's unusual because it intentionally, as I suggest, it spoils things on purpose. It spoils twists. Some people find that tough. What you have to understand, I would say the first time I read this as a teenager, I had no issue with it. On this reread, I really appreciated it. I thought it was really clever. Some people find it difficult because it's very unusual. A big thing going on with that is that Herbert he has mysteries he doesn't want to fully reveal, that he wants you to discover, but he doesn't care about some of the things we expect to be twists, like, the Atreides are set up for a trap and there's a traitor. That's set up at the very beginning. In fact, you know very quickly who the traitor is. I think the 3rd chapter, you find out who the traitor is. You're not meant to be surprised by these things. You're meant to wonder how they're going to resolve, but not that they're going to resolve. Lots of things are set up like that. And he just says, by the way, this happens. By the way, this... And the epigraphs on each chapter from the commentaries of the Princess Irulan are often a hint about what's going to happen in the chapter and beyond. So he's very open about that. But there's other mysteries to do with particularly the nature of the planet Dune that he doesn't want you to know, and he doesn't tell you quickly, and sometimes he never fully explains in this book in the way that some authors might. I'd say he does it very well. It's very compelling, but it's something where the genius of it is precisely in where he's unusual, not in where he matches your expectations. There's a large cast of characters. Virtually all of them get a good time on screen, including the leading villain, Baron Harkonnen. He is a vile, revolting person. You also get one of his nephews as well, Feyd-Rautha, who's a really interesting character actually in terms of some of the things that Herbert once kind of hints at briefly to do with him. it's a fascinating experience and decision by Herbert, not just to have lots of points of view, which I guess now is pretty common, but to give you head time in the heads of lots of characters, to know all their plots, to know everything that's going on really in so many areas, and to get different perspectives where you, because you're third person omniscient with the narrator, just know what's really going on. That's interesting. The characters have varied motives and personalities. There is usually a thread you can follow, therefore, to work out what they're going to do. In that sense, they are realistic, distinct characters. He is not as great a character writer as some people, but again, sometimes people say, "Oh, I didn't really get the characters." I don't get that complaint. I think the characters are clearly and distinctly drawn. Some of the arch style that Herbert uses in writing can perhaps it muddies things for readers looking for a simple set of voices. So I'm reading Joe Abercrombie at the moment, who has a really good mastery of character voice, and Herbert has some character voice, but there is an arch style he uses, a distancing style, which both for generally the plot development but also the characters, I can imagine some readers kind of having to come to grips with, but it works for me. The world building is probably in the top 5 or so of sci-fi ever. It's soft world building in the sense that you don't get kind of long disquisitions on how light speed travel works. Lots of the science is left general. Some scientific things are explicitly suppressed or removed. So AI is not a question because of the Butlerian jihad, not mentioned in the first book, but AI doesn't exist because it's been eliminated. So the interest in science is very different to some kind of heavy sci-fi. In that sense, you almost feel like, oh man, are we actually hitting new wave sci-fi here from the 60s? But it's not really new wave either. It's just Herbert has specific interests that he wants to talk about. Lots of the details are left in the background, though, in a way that is very clever. What I mean is this. So not just the science, but the political details, the social details. You don't know all the social rules. You get told half of them through characters experiencing them in a way that gives them great depth. What I mean is, it's as if you're overhearing a conversation sometimes where you know these people are talking about something you don't fully understand, but you can grasp enough to say, okay, so it's something like this, and be fascinated by it. I think that works really well, that this soft world building gives you not loads of nitty gritty out there where you understand all the science of things or all the rules, and therefore you are predicting what's going to happen next in that way. But it's a discovery ride of this weird alien new culture you don't know, and you get enough details to get a grip while kind of holding on, trying to get to the end and find out what's going to happen. Even so, there are some clever things that he does set up so that by the end, you don't know what's going to happen in all these cases, but you begin to know the social texture of the world in a way that even though brand new stuff is happening, even though brand new social situations are emerging, political situations are emerging, military situations are emerging, you know the ways it might go, even though you've never been told fully, and that's, I think, really clever world building. It is in that sense, it's specifically it's show, not tell. Telling is fine, by the way, much more okay than people think sometimes. The plot is enjoyable. It's unpredictable in one sense. It's laid out very clearly in advance in other senses. My single criticism of the book, probably of the only criticism I'd give that isn't simply a subjective, some people may find this harder to grapple with, but maybe the only material criticism I'd give is that the plot wraps up quickly. It's a 407-page book in my edition, like it's that much or whatever. It's pretty long, but the last few beats feel perhaps very slightly hurried. There is a satisfying conclusion, but a few things round that just end like, okay, I have to deal with that later. And I suspect, certainly with some of these things, they are things he does pick up in sequels. So you can tell perhaps in part he thought, this isn't when I want to talk about this. And that's fine, but it's maybe my one criticism of the book. But really, this book gets its vigour and its energy not from world-building, plot, character, the things we normally think of, but from its themes. Lots of books do get their energy from their themes, no doubt. But it's easy to forget that when so much of what we enjoy in good books and so much of what we talk about in good books is the style, the plot, understandably. And obviously, if someone had some interesting themes but was a terrible writer, we wouldn't enjoy the book very much. But Herbert is a big themes and ideas guy. He's very much a sci-fi writer in that sense. And I want to highlight 2 out of many possible ones, probably the 2 most important in the book. There are other themes than these. There's big questions about leadership, religion. A really interesting thing for religion is, when does the cynical exploitation of religion accidentally become a sincere and new thing, is just a really fascinating question. Or how does human leadership work? Things like that. But the two big themes that I'd want to draw out from book one are, one, the nature of human history and human success and failure. The race consciousness, as it gets called at times. Herbert sci-fi's this up with the special abilities people have, with the special history of the universe that he's created. But he's really having a think here about what drives on the human species, how we think, how we thrive, how we decline, what makes for viable civilizations. It's interesting in the context of the 60s to think you could compare that to Lord Clark's famous series Civilization, where he tries to offer a partial answer about what civilization is. Here, Herbert is wondering what makes for viable, long-term, robust civilizations, and when do they need to change and when do they need to adapt. I think the answers that Herbert offers, partial qualified answers without moral judgments necessarily, at least not strong ones, they're worrying, they're disturbing, they're possibly true in some senses. I think that's an interesting, challenging thing about the book, because it has a, not prophetic in that sense, but a insightful nature. But the fact he's willing to have the discussion without unexamined presuppositions being smuggled in makes this really important sci-fi, I think. The other theme I want to draw out is ecology and the environment. And Herbert cared a lot about ecology and the environment. He dedicated the book to dryland ecologists, indeed. And he, a major theme of the book, or feature of the plot, and the action, things that happen and things that matter in the story, is the ecology of Dune, the mysteries of how Dune works as a planet, how the spice is created, and what creatures are there. And not all those mysteries are unveiled here, because ecology is a complex and deep subject. You begin to find out things, you discover tiny bits as you go, you piece it together as if you two are investigating the world. A reasonably important character is the planetary ecologist, Kynes. And it's obvious that in connection with human destiny, Herbert wants us to talk about systems and the ways that we interact with the natural world. And as I say, that's integrated really, really well into the plot. It is, in that sense, the plot is about environmentalism at one level, which is really interesting. Not in an unexamined presuppositions being smuggled in and forced upon the reader, but just in a fairly naturalistic and open way, which I think is really positive, really interesting. But it's a book that should remind us, for instance, that as we think about ourselves, that the desert is not sterile. When we think about the natural world, the desert is not a sterile place. It has vigorous and virtuous systems that can be helped or harmed, and that's the same, of course, with all of the natural world. And it has so much potential for sustainable human living. I'll put some videos actually in the description, and nothing to do with books, but just on greening the desert. The fact that there are things that humans can adapt and can create sustainable systems. And in that sense, he really is prophetic in terms of so much what we may speak about now, one way or the other, different opinions on that. But he really does want to say, look, there are ways that we can create viable systems, not just at the civilizational level, but at the environmental level, and the two are naturally connected. It's very good, this book. And many people would say all the Herbert Dune books are very good, all the Frank Herbert ones are very good, but the first book, Dune, is very good. If you like sci-fi, you should read it, and there's not really much more to say on that. If you have read it, if you've read the other books, tell me what you think in the comments. Till next time.